All right, everybody. This is another episode of Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. This will be our second consecutive episode away from each other, just because last week my son was sick and we weren't sure what he had. It wasn't COVID. This weekend I'm sick and I'm still recovering from what he had, which is like a cold, a head cold, lots of coughing and nastiness. So hopefully next week we'll be back in person together, Wayne, and we can see each other's lovely faces.
Indeed, sir. Your guys' health is what is most important, though, and
Yes,
get you guys feeling better and feeling good. So
hopefully it'll happen soon.
Of a show, though, so here we are.
Yes.
Audio again.
Audio only for a second week in a row, how we used to do it, back before Wayne was even coming into the garage. So guys, this week, it's Halloween month, if you will. We did children horror films last week. This week we're going to do creature features / werewolf movies. I figure it's a good combo because werewolves are creatures, but they are kind of their own genre in itself. So I wanted to kind of combine the two. But I mean, how could we talk about creature features and not talk about probably the most influential creature film of all time, and that's Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg. We've talked about this movie before, Wayne, right?
Oh, I'm sure we had to have mentioned it. Maybe even around the 4th of July.
Well, the Spielberg episode for sure, yeah. Yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah, that guy, too.
That guy. Jaws is just one of those movies. My wife was just watching it this morning while we ate breakfast. It's just so good from start to finish. It's intense. It's a little bloody for a PG horror film from the 70s. We did mention it last week too because it is rated PG, so it's not too gory or anything. But for a PG film from back then, it does have a bit more blood than people are probably used to these days. Great cast: Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Lorraine Gray, Murray Hamilton. What's a memory? What's something that sticks out to you, Wayne, from Jaws?
Oh God, finding the body parts or the head, I think.
Yeah.
Diving.
Yep. Yep.
That like many others. I did not want to get into an open body of water, honestly, because I was freaked out. Like, oh yeah, it's like we don't have sharks up here in the Midwest in the Chicagoland area with like the dunes and whatnot. It's like don't trust it, don't want to risk it. I put my feet in, but that's about it.
Jaws, I will say, has for me, and you're right in the same vein. I, for most of my life, will not put my feet into water that I can't see through. Even if it's lake water where I know my brain tells me there's no sharks there, but my body's like, you know what, but there could be something else. Or maybe a shark stuck through. I can't see it, so I don't know. So I've always kind of lived with that life where even when I dip my feet in water I can't see through, I'm kind of like, I'm very hesitant at first.
Especially now that we live down here in Florida, we don't have to worry about, we have to worry about sharks, but other dinosaur-looking creatures,
Yes.
Well, which we may talk about later on in the episode, so I won't go into. But yo, man.
Yes.
Yo, no.
No,
sir, I do not.
I don't want to go walk about. Like we have like a retention pond behind some of the houses over here. I don't want to go walk over there because they could be in any body of water. That's what they told me when I moved down here, and I believe them. So yeah. I don't go messing with that shit.
Well, there is a video right now of like a 14-foot alligator eating a smaller alligator on the internet. It's making the rounds. Like, what why?
No. They're turning on each other finally. Yeah, scary shit. The one thing, I think people remember from Jaws 2 is the music. The music is such a huge part. You hear that tone from when Jaws is coming.
Yeah, the 2 notes.
Yep. Instantly freak out. It's just one of those things that's very tense, very just makes you feel uncomfortable, and you know that it's coming, and you know what's about to happen. And it's just a movie that it hit everything right. It got the acting, it got the music, it got the scariness factor by not showing the shark, which again was kind of incidental because the shark broke a lot, so they really had to do it without using the shark a lot, which led to the whole not revealing the shark until later in the movie because they couldn't. But it made the movie better. It was one of those things that was kind of a happy accident. The shark breaking made the movie more intense and more exciting, I think.
Indeed. And again, the shark wasn't the only monster in the movie. The corrupt politicians, they know there's a risk, but we can't lose money, so let's just open the beaches.
Yep. Yeah. That the mayor. Many jokes were made when all this COVID stuff was happening and the beaches and stuff. Everyone wanted the beaches open between like DeSantis and Trump and the mayor from Jaws. And we're like, oh wow, the mayor from Jaws is now running our country. Because that's how it was. It was like, well, what about these tourist dollars and all these people? People need to spend money in the economy, and everyone's like, but people are dying. So then you draw the correlation to Jaws, where people are dying, yet all they care about are the summer money and the people showing up on their beaches and spending cash.
Of course.
That's what politicians think of. We reviewed a movie, I believe it was called The Last Shark, where it was very similar. You had the rich guy who wanted everyone to show up for the 4th of July celebration. So yeah, Jaws, just a classic creature feature. It still holds up. That's the amazing thing is over 40 years later, or almost, over 40 years later, this thing is still being shown out in the ocean. There's that. One day I would love to go to watch it in the ocean. I know that kind of goes against what I just said recently, where I can't, if I don't like seeing in the water, why would I do that? But it seems like a fun way to watch the movie. I forget whether it's like in Texas or something like that. So they're doing those kind of things, and it's showing at drive-ins over the summer and stuff like that. So it's a movie that's still ingrained itself in society, and people still know about it. And while it had 3 awful sequels, I don't know that we're ever going to see a remake, which is a good thing, I think. Because it's it's one of those movies that's very near perfect. So why would you want to remake it? There's nothing you could do really to make it better. You can make a movie just as good as it may be, but you're never going to succeed past what it already is. So why try?
I think it would rely too heavily on CGI, and I think I don't see it being better. You're 100% correct there.
Yeah, there's no way I think that comes out looking good. Never say they can't remake it, because they remake anything they want these days, but I just have a hard time seeing that one actually getting greenlit. They've talked about it, but it's just one I see not happening. All right, so we're going to switch over to werewolf movies. In 1941, Wayne, they made this movie called The Wolfman. Directed by George Wagner, written by Kurt Siodmak, starring Claude Rains, who was the Invisible Man, Ralph Bellamy, Bela Lugosi, who played Dracula, but Lon Chaney Jr., son of Lon Chaney, who was the man of 1,000 faces, could be anybody, anything, Phantom of the Opera, all that stuff. His son, Lon Chaney Jr., kind of took over the mantle and started doing these type of movies too, where he was covered in makeup the entire time. He plays the Wolfman. I'll be honest, Wayne, I watched this for the first time yesterday as part of my, to jump off my October 31 Days of Horror. I had not seen this one. I've been kind of trying to make my way through the classic movies. I've seen a lot of the other ones like Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and stuff like that. This one, I hadn't watched it till yesterday. I liked it. It was good.
This was one of my dad's favorite horror movies, so I'm definitely familiar with it through my childhood. Like the whole, the metamorphosis, or like or not the chain, like when he becomes the
yes,
wolf,
the chain, yeah, transformation. Yes. For this time to do a transformation as good as that is pretty impressive. Now, obviously, it was done mostly through camera tricks. You could tell watching Jaws and then watching this movie, you could kind of see where Jaws got the idea of, like, since this shark broke, like, all right, let's just do what they used to do and not show the creature until later in the movie. And that's what the Wolfman is. You really don't get a good look at a Wolfman, or in this case, the Wolfman, because there are multiple, but one goes away earlier. But you don't even see him really. So then you don't get a chance at seeing the lead Wolfman until later in the film. So I have to imagine for audiences in 1941, it was probably pretty terrifying. For now, it's not that scary anymore, but it was still fun. It was still a good movie. It was interesting to kind of see, because I'd seen the remake. I had not seen this one yet, so I'm still drawing comparisons between the remake and this one. And I know people hate the remake. I didn't hate the remake. I thought it was okay. I've been meaning to watch it again just to see if I like it more the second time around.
The remake was what, 2008, 2009, something like that.
I'm gonna say a little late, like 2012 maybe. It was their first attempt at the Universal monster outside of the Mummy, obviously, but like they were trying to make that monster verse, so they did Dracula Untold, and they did the Wolfman, and neither one were reviewed very well, so they kind of can't. And then they had the Tom Cruise Mummy disaster. It had Anthony Hopkins, it had Benicio del Toro in it. I thought they were good as the Talbot father and son, but it just it was a lot of CG. And when you watch a werewolf movie, the transformation is really what you're looking for. We'll get into what I think the best, and I think most people think the best transformation werewolf scene is in history with our next werewolf movie. But this one, I think.
Sorry, sir. The correct answer is Thriller.
That's not a movie, okay? That's like you could say at most it's a short film. But yes, that is a good transformation as well. So yeah, I mean, this movie, if you haven't seen it, it's out there. I'm not sure if it's on Peacock or not right now, but it has been in the past when they put up their horror movies and stuff. If you haven't seen it, check it out because it's for as far as black and white horror movies go, it's pretty good. I dug it for what it was. It's not something that I think your kids may be impressed with these days, but it's something that you could show them without feeling like you're a bad parent.
Are you familiar with Nosferatu?
Only a little bit. I have yet to actually watch it. And I feel bad as a horror fan saying that, but I haven't watched it yet.
I always I don't know why, but like I know the direct link should be Dracula, but I always felt like just as like a creep factor, the Nosferatu and the Wolfman always seem to just kind of go hand in hand in my head. Like I don't know, just like the creepiness of the monster without the outright fright of it.
No, I get you because like Dracula, if you look at Bela Lugosi's Dracula, he's not really scary. It's what he does that makes him scary. Where if you look at Wolfman or Creature from the Black Lagoon or Frankenstein or Nosferatu, you're gonna just get kind of terrified by seeing their appearance. So I completely understand that for sure. But yeah, we did talk about Nosferatu a little bit last year on the vampire podcast. All right, so the next monster movie or creature feature, rather, since we already did a topic called monster movies. The next creature feature I want to talk about, Wayne, is I actually listened to a podcast yesterday on Donovan and I went out and it was on this movie called Tremors from 1990. Directed by Ron Underwood, starring Brent Maddock. Just like Jaws spawned a bunch of unimportant sequels for the most part. This came out in 1990. It was a box office disaster. Critically, it wasn't really praised at the time. Over time, Tremors has become a cult classic. If you're into horror films or monster movies or creature movies, you're going to know this movie. You've seen it. It stars Fred Ward, Kevin Bacon, Michael Gross, Reba McEntire, one other, and the little girl from Jurassic Park is also in it. Area Richards or whatever her name is. Ariana Richards, sorry. Tremors is a movie where two kind of roughnecks are working in the desert and they're kind of having a tough time and they're kind of do odd jobs that people need done. And they're known in that area, but they're not from that area. It takes place in Perfection, Nevada. And they find this guy who's they think is murdered, and it ends up being that there's these giant worms in the ground that are coming up and they're killing people. And so it's up to these two kind of blue collar roughnecks to save the day along with two red state survivalists and this girl who's like a scientist who's like kind of been investigating the shockwaves that these worms have been leaving, not knowing that that's what the problem was, but just kind of investigating that these things have been happening. And then it just turns into this great, funny, action-packed creature feature with Kevin Bacon in a hillbilly accent playing Valentine. It's funny, it's hilarious, it's bloody to a certain extent. It's only PG-13, so it's not like gory or anything, but it's just a really, really fun movie, Wayne, and I've always been a huge fan of this one. I have the DVD and the Blu-ray. And so, yeah, Tremors is just a movie that, you kind of feel like you're in a little club because a lot of people don't talk about it very much, but I feel like there's a lot more people out there that like it that maybe are ashamed to talk about it because it's a movie about giant worms. But the effects are kick ass, man. Especially for 1990, they're really cool. Not really like that much digital effects. A little bit towards the end, but for the most part, it's all practical, and it's just a badass movie. Wayne, are you familiar? Which I know you're familiar with Tremors, but have you seen it? Or have you seen it recently?
I have not seen it recently, but my grandmother took me to see Tremors when I was like 5, 6, whatever it came out. She wanted to see it, and I'm like terrified of the giant penis worms. I have not seen it in recent times though.
Believe it or not, apparently there were designs where it looked more like a penis. So what we end up getting is less penis like than what they originally had in mind.
I don't know how I feel about that.
So the version we got was the less penis version. Yeah, I mean, it's funny too because you said your grandmother brought you. You were like 6, 7 years old. It really, we didn't talk about it last week, but it could also be considered a gateway horror film because it is only PG-13. So back in the 90s, and there isn't like any sex or nudity in it, which some PG-13 movies back then had a little bit of that kind of stuff. So there really is nothing for parents to be worried about in this movie. So you can even use this one as another gateway horror film, I think. Which is, makes it even that more interesting. And it kind of made me, when I was listening to the podcast yesterday, I was like, where they were talking about Trump, I was like, maybe I should show this to Donovan. Yep. All right, so the next werewolf movie I want to talk about is probably what's considered to be the greatest werewolf movie of all time by a lot of people, including myself. Even though I think there's another one that's a close second, which I'll get to as well. An American Werewolf in London. 1981, directed by John Landis. Starring, written by him as well, starring David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, Griffin Dunn, John Woodvine. Two friends go backpacking through like Europe, and they're in London, and one of them gets killed, the other one gets bit by a werewolf, and then it's a movie about this guy basically trying to figure out how to reverse the curse of the werewolf. There's a female who is also a werewolf who is trying to help him. It follows similar rules that some vampire movies, like if you kill the leader, then everything stops, that type of thing. So they're trying to kill like the main werewolf. It's a dark comedy. It's really funny. It has what I would consider the best transformation werewolf sequence put to film. And I don't know if that was their intention when they made it, but that's really, they've done it, and there hasn't been, in my mind, any that have done it better. There may be ones that are on par with American Werewolf in London, but there really isn't anyone who's been able to outshine them. And this is another one that did get a pretty awful sequel in the 90s. I probably saw the sequel. It's another case where I probably saw the sequel first because, this original one came out in 1981. I wasn't born yet. So when I saw the sequel, I was like, oh, well, maybe I should go and watch the original. And the original is fantastic. Where the sequel, I enjoyed parts of the sequel. It has a young cast and stuff like that I know from the 90s. But this one is such a classic, and the werewolf scenes are just so amazing. And this movie is just such an iconic film that I think people need to see if they haven't seen it.
Yeah, going back to the transformation, the use of practical effects and whatever special effects it was just amazing to watch. It's like, holy crap, with the balloons that inflate and deflate under the mask and the layering of the costumes and the skin. It's like, it's really, really disturbing, for that time especially. Like, holy crap,
Yes, in a movie that you're supposed to laugh at too. So that's when you have a movie that's funny, but then also you have this really gross transformation scene that just kind of works. The one scene that always sticks out in my head, Wayne, is when like the paws extend out from the hand, like that, just in the crackling and stuff, and you just get like, you're like, it's just gross sounding, but it's perfect. It works so well. And then, of course, you have the Griffin Dunn who he's the character that dies, and then he comes back as a ghost. So you throw that other supernatural element into this movie where like their victims kind of haunt them. So it's an interesting aspect, I think, to the film. And Griffin Dunn is hilarious, so it really works, I think, in that movie. And David Naughton has gone on to be in kind of some other horror movies. Griffin Dunn has had the better career, I would say, but Naughton has gone on to be in some other horror movie stuff. But yeah, that's a classic. So if you haven't seen that one, you definitely need to check it out. The next one is another horror comedy going back to Creature Features. It's called Lake Placid. This movie came out in the late '90s, and it was one of those that I'll put up there with like Slither, which we talked about somewhat recently. Um, it it's a comedy, but people didn't know it was a comedy when it came out. So people were like, "Oh, a stupid like alligator crocodile movie where freaking it's in a lake. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid." And but it's such a like hilarious and dark comedy horror film that it works to perfection. Um, it was directed by Steve Miner, written by David E. Kelly, creator of that one lawyer show with what's her name, Ally McBeal, and many other TV shows. But he wrote Lake Placid. It stars Bill Pullman, Bridget Fonda, Oliver Platt, and Brendan Gleeson. The plot is there is like an alligator death that's reported, and Bridget Fonda works for a museum, so she comes out to like investigate. And they end up realizing, sorry, it's crocodile, not alligator. They end up realizing there's a crocodile in the lake, which is very uncommon. So they end up bringing in Oliver Platt, who's like a scientist, who then like he like tells them like, oh no, there's this path to the ocean where he could get through if he really wanted to. So they end up having these crocodiles in this lake, and they have to basically. It's one of those like it's kind of like Jaws, like a comedic Jaws. Like you got to fight until the end, until you end up blowing it up or capturing it. They find out there's multiple ones. Betty White has been feeding them. You find out earlier in the movie, or maybe in the middle of the movie, that she fed her dead husband to the crocodile. Kind of accounting for why he's getting so big, because he keeps eating like livestock and humans. It's gory. It's such a fun gory movie. The heads popping off, getting eaten off, and body parts, kind of like Jaws, body parts everywhere. Um, Bill Pullman is great as the straight character, very very earnest, which leads to a lot of very funny moments. There's a great comedy duo between Oliver Platt and Brendan Gleeson, where they go back and forth with each other a lot. Bridget Fonda plays the kind of like almost like you're taking a rich woman and making her sleep in the woods. Like she plays that part really well, but she's also pretty tough too in her own right. It's a fun movie. Have you seen this one, Wayne?
I have not. When I heard about Lake Placid, I'm like, oh, they're making a movie about the Olympic Games. Okay. That's the only time I'd ever heard of Lake Placid. Was when they hosted the Olympics once.
Yeah, which is like this is like Lake Placid, Florida, I believe is where is it? I think that's where it takes place. We'll get to another movie about these creatures that we have here in Florida too, that like to bite people. But this one, again, like I feel like just people weren't sure about it when it came out, and it really has, similar to Tremors, has become a cult classic. It's gotten special Blu-ray release over the last couple of years because of how popular it was. It's just a really fun movie, and if you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. Sometimes it's free on Vudu, sometimes it's on like Stars. Totally worth your time though. It's such a great cast too. Especially if you're into like '90s films, you'll be like, oh my god, I know everybody in this movie.
Nice.
So moving on to the next werewolf movie, we have The Howling. The Howling had the unfortunate timing of coming out also in 1981, the same year as American Werewolf in London. Has a pretty good transformation scene, not as good as an American Werewolf in London, but has a good one all on its own. Directed by Joe Dante, another big comedy / horror director from the 80s. Stars Dee Wallace, Patrick Macnee, Dennis Dugan, Christopher Stone, Belinda Blasky, Kevin McCarthy, John Carradine, Slim Pickens, and Elizabeth Brooks. This one's more like a cult, Wayne. There's this reporter goes to this town. It's Dee Wallace, and she ends up getting involved in this whole werewolf cult conspiracy thing, and it's a really kind of a weird story. There's a lot of sex is involved in this one, and more in the plot of the story. Um, it was reading right here characters and a sultry nymphomaniac named Marcia. She meets one of the first main characters in a porn theater. So this one's very adult. This where I would say you could probably show an American Werewolf in London to a somewhat younger audience. This one probably 16, 17 would be the least, the smallest age range, I would say.
Gotcha.
But it's gory, it's funny, it's a really good movie. It was one of those I hadn't seen it. I probably only saw it for the first time maybe 3-4 years ago. But since I saw it, I was like, wow, that's also a great werewolf movie that I think people don't talk about as much. Now it probably is watered down where American Werewolf in London only had one sequel. This one's had 7, and they're all awful. So from what I understand. But the first one, if you could see the first one, it's truly a really great movie. Just the cast alone, Dee Wallace, she's a horror icon. So, I mean, just to have her as the main character in the movie helps. Dick Miller, another horror icon, he's in it as well. He's in all of Joe Dante's movies for the most part. So, that makes a lot of sense that he would be in that. Yeah, I don't want to really give anything away because I feel like people haven't seen this one as much, and I haven't seen it. I've only seen it once or twice. So, it is a fantastic movie, though. If you're kind of looking for a different werewolf movie that you haven't seen, I'm going to guess that you probably haven't seen The Howling. It's more like some of the other movies I've talked about, kind of become a cult classic, whereas An American Werewolf in London was actually very popular when it came out. All right. So Crawl is one of the most recent movies to come out that we're going to talk about. That is a movie that takes place in Florida, not too far from where we live, Wayne. If you watch Crawl, you could actually see a lot of our street signs and stuff on the highway of where she's headed. They filmed it. I believe they filmed it here. It's from 2019. It's directed by Alexandre Aja, written by Michael and Sean Rasmussen. Stars Kaya Scodelario and Barry Pepper. That's basically the two main characters you need to know. Barry Pepper plays the father, who no one can get a hold of. So the daughter, who's a swimmer, that's important to the plot because a lot of this movie takes place in Florida, where it's flooded, and her swimming actually comes into being needed. And she goes to her dad's house. She goes to the office, and then she goes to the house, and she can't find him. And then the dog's like, "Hey, he's over here." And she finds out that he's been hurt and he's underneath the house. And so she goes to rescue him, but she doesn't know that at the time there are alligators underneath there. And that's what he's kind of been hurt by, and he's kind of hiding from at the moment. So then it becomes a survival horror of her and her father trying to escape the alligators that are stuck under their house with them. There are other characters that are introduced basically as food. There's a convenience store across the street that people try to rob, so they get eaten by the alligators. There's some police officers that come try to help, and that doesn't go too well for them either. A really intense movie. It has some good scare parts to it too. I took Donovan in theaters to see this one. It was his first R-rated movie that he saw. He jumped quite a few times. It was fun to kind of see that reaction. He wanted to see it because he likes animals and alligators and stuff. So we have, for me, it will always hold a place in my heart for that moment. But it is a good movie. On top of that, it's just a really good, entertaining, thrilling film about. And again, when people hear creature features, I think they like, oh, that's gonna be dumb. But this one, I think, uses the environment very well to where you believe this kind of stuff could actually have happened. And then not so recently, Wayne. Sorry to cut you off there. This did happen in New Orleans. So I don't know if you heard of it that recently when they had their flooding. A similar story like this happened. Unfortunately, the guy was taken away by the alligator. But it's pretty crazy that something like this could actually happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on a little bit when you're on the creature features thing because the campiness. They like the 1950 monster movies, you know.
Yeah.
You've got the Blob, and you've got Tarantula.
Yep.
And then you can get to the whole Godzilla monsters thing. So kind of campy, not great, animation or not animation, like special effects.
For sure, guys in rubber suits.
Yeah, I'm glad that we have obviously moved on from that.
What's good though about in those movies, I think too, you're right. Like they were cheesy, they were very small budget. But when you watch something like Slither or Crawl or like Placid, even though the effects are better and everything looks cooler, they still keep a lot of that charm of those movies had that made those movies entertaining to people. So you kind of see them pay homage to those cheesy films like The Blob and stuff like that, which I think is fun. And interesting enough, like The Blob actually has probably one of the best remakes ever made of the 1988 version of The Blob. So much better than the original because they take it more seriously too. It's funny, but it's also serious at the same time. Where the original Blob it's a good movie, but it's weird because it's the 1950s. It's Steve McQueen. It's a little strange. All right, so another one I just watched. I've seen it before, but I never really paid that close attention. But I just watched it this week, called Silver Bullet. It's a werewolf movie, and it stars that's not what I was looking for. It stars Gary Busey, Corey Haim, and a few other people. Obviously, because there's more than two people in a movie usually. Everett McGill, Megan Follows, Terry O'Quinn, again, we talked about him last week. Lawrence Tierney, Bill Smitovich. Let's see. James Gammon, who coached Lou Brown. He's in the very beginning. Wayne, he gets taken out really quickly.
That's unfortunate.
It is. I was like, oh, it's Coach Lou Brown. And I'm like, oh, there goes Coach Lou Brown.
Check white walls?
He was, yes. He had to call somebody about some white walls, and he got taken out by a werewolf. Directed by Dan Attias. Written, actually, it's based on a novel by Stephen King. He wrote the screenplay for it. I did not know that. The novel is called Cycle of the Werewolf. Produced by Dino De Laurentiis. So this one starts out, you got Corey Haim, plays a kid in a wheelchair who loves hanging out with his uncle because his uncle is one of the few people that treats him like a normal person. And he appreciates that. He also builds him like these cool motorized wheelchairs. So he's really always excited to hang out with his crazy uncle, Gary Busey. Who, I mean, is the crazy uncle in real life, let's face it. And it's a really fun 80s werewolf movie. The transformation and the actual werewolf aren't great, which is why you don't see this movie mentioned with some of the other ones I already talked about. But it's still a fun, just 1980s movie. There is a narration, which is kind of awful. I did not care for that. I think that was because to tie up like loose ends and stuff, and that weren't in the script, they just added narration, which a lot of people do that all the time. It just didn't work for me. But it's a fun movie. I do recommend it for people. Wayne, have you seen Silver Bullet?
I have not.
Okay. It's definitely something I would recommend watching at least once to see, Corey Haim again. We've talked about Corey Haim several times in this podcast. He's good in this role as the young kid, and Gary Busey is kind of great as the uncle. The finale though, the climax takes maybe about like 7 minutes, so that could have been a little bit longer, but it was still a fun movie, and I do recommend people watching it. All right, so back to the Creature feature, the last one there I want to talk about, and I've mentioned this movie before. It's a newer one. It just came out at the beginning of the pandemic. It's called Underwater, or right before the pandemic hit. It's with Kristen Stewart, and it is an underwater monster movie, kind of akin to like Aliens or The Abyss. It's about they have to like, it's one of those movies they got to get to a certain point, and in between that they start running into all these monsters, and it was a really really fun monster movie, creature feature, whatever you want to call it. And I really enjoyed the hell out of it. And Kristen Stewart has just been a lot of fun to watch lately. Anyway, she's been in a lot of different movies. Each one is kind of different in its own right. It's Kristen Stewart, Vincent Cassell, Jessica Henwick, John Gallagher Jr., Mamadou Athie, and T.J. Miller are the stars of this movie. It is the plot. Kepler 822, a research and drilling facility operated by Tion Industries at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, is struck by a strong earthquake. As part of the facility is destroyed by the quake, mechanical engineer Nora Price and her colleagues Rodrigo and Paul make their way to the escape pod bay. However, the three discover that all the escape pods have already been deployed, with Captain Lucien being the only person in the area when the three arrive. Together, they reach a control base and find they just keep finding more survivors and stuff, and then they have to kind of make their way out of the ship and try to get to the surface. And they come across this huge, like, underwater, like, creature that's just incredible, and it's almost like the civilization that's been underground for this whole time. So it's really kind of insane, and how it happens, and it's just a really kind of kick-ass movie that I think people didn't see because, one, it was in theaters in January right before the pandemic hit, and then it did go to HBO. So if you have had HBO, you could have watched it a while back. I don't think it's there anymore though. It might be on Cinemax, but well worth your time just renting it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, it's a good flick.
Very nice.
And then the last werewolf movie I'll mention, we won't talk a lot about it, but is Late Phases. This is an interesting one, Wayne, because it's a werewolf movie that takes place in a retirement home. And, like, one of the people that live at the retirement home is a werewolf. And so it becomes a story of this older guy who was like a cop at one point, but now he's like 80 and living in this retirement home. And he takes it upon himself to, like, try to solve this mystery, if it's the last thing he does. Ethan Embry is in it, along with Nick Demisi and Lance Guest. It's directed by Adrian Garcia Bugliana. Written by Eric Stoltz, but not that Eric Stoltz. Spelled differently. Unless he changed his name. Let's see. Will moves his father, Ambrose McKinley, a fiercely independent yet blind Vietnam War veteran, and his seeing eye dog, German Shepherd, into a retirement community at the edge of the forest. So he's blind, too, on top of that. So, women, kind of like fall over him because he's a veteran and he's somewhat of an attractive older man, I guess. But they kind of go to him to, like, kind of help them out. And it's a really just good independent werewolf movie. It's got a pretty good transformation sequence in it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's a lot of fun. It's just one of those things that sometimes you see these movies and they're just entertaining. And this one is just really entertaining. I do recommend watching Late Phases if you get a chance, if you come across it on Netflix or Amazon or something. Honorable mentions: The Werewolf of Snow Hollow, that's a more newer one. The Host from 2007, we've talked about that one before. Love and Monsters, A Quiet Place 1 and 2, both really good. The Meg and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the original, good black and white creature feature.
I wanted your opinion on one that kind of took the internet by storm at the end of 2018. What were your thoughts on Bird Box? Falls in this category at all, or is that just kind of more of a psychological thing?
It does. I think it fits. It definitely fits with, like, A Quiet Place. It's a very similar plot device, I think, to that movie. I think it definitely counts. While I liked Bird Box the first time I saw it, I've seen it a couple times since. I'm not as big of a fan of it anymore. That's why I didn't mention it. But it definitely, sure, it's an honorable mention, I would say. Bird Box, if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend checking it out because it does do some interesting things. But I feel like if you've seen A Quiet Place, you're kind of going to go like, oh, well, this is just like that movie. There's also another movie on there called Silence, which is very similar to Bird Box. So it's kind of like they made a bunch of these movies all at once.
Yeah.
And it just, I guess it kind of depends on what you saw first, right? So if you saw Bird Box first, you probably saw Quiet Place, and you're like, oh, well, this is just like that one, where in reverse it, it's a solid movie. It's just not one of my favorites, I would say.
I don't know. Everybody was, like, raving about it, and I'm just like, I saw it, and I'm like, it was creative, I guess, but I was just kind of like,
Yeah.
And then just before we get into our reviews of the week, I would be remiss and I would kind of hate myself if I didn't mention It Follows. I know I've talked about it before. I know you're quite fond of it.
Yes,
Is
huge
this
fan.
a movie or is this more of like something?
I've always kind of looked at that one as more of a ghost movie because it's like an entity that follows them around.
Gotcha. I was like,
But
possibly demon type thing. I don't know.
It Follows. It did pop up on some of the lists though. When I started looking up like creature features, it definitely was on there. I just don't view it as such.
Gotcha,
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then, just as we wrap up, we got stuff like, I don't know, would you consider the Babadook? Are you familiar with that one?
Oh yeah, I love Babadook.
All right, and then just before we move on, like we really talked about real quick, you got the Babadook, Anacondas, just some other.
Well, the first one, Anaconda, yeah, Anaconda was the giant snake movie, yeah.
Right, yes, because Anacondas is actually the name of a couple of the sequels.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, one or two of the sequels. I can't remember. Yeah, Anaconda is an interesting one. It's fun. It's stupid. It's really stupid, but it's fun. It's also interesting now just because then you can watch John Voight be eaten by a giant snake, and he's a douchebag. So,
deserves it.
Yes, he does. All right, so let's get on to our next topic, Wayne. Our reviews.
Oh, week.
All right, so we're gonna start off with the one I think that we've both been waiting for the most. Neither of these movies tie into today's topic, but they're two brand new movies. One of them we've known about for a couple of years now, and we've been waiting for it, and it's The Many Saints of Newark. It is a Sopranos story, is what the poster says. And so it's a movie that takes place. It's a 2-hour film that takes place in the earlier world of the Sopranos. So like I think it's in the 60s, right?
60s into the 70s.
Into the 70s, yeah. So it's like starts in the late 60s, and then we go ahead 4 years, which puts us in the early 70s. Directed by Alan Taylor, written by David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, and Lawrence Connor. Starring Alessandro Nivola, Leslie Odom Jr., John Bernthal, Corey Stoll. Michael Gandolfini, the son of James Gandolfini, plays the teenage version of Tony Soprano. Bill Magnuson, Michael DeRossi, John Magaro, Ray Liotta, and Vera Farmiga. I kind of laughed when I said John Magaro because I thought his portrayal of Syl was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. And he's an actor I've kind of been following for a while, and it's fun to kind of see him in this role, I would say.
We also got Michael Imperioli reprising the role of Christopher Moltisanti as the narrator at the beginning and the end, which made my heart happy because I thought he did such a fantastic job. He does a fantastic job in everything he's in, but as Christopher and the flawed character that he was, it's just nice that they touched on him.
Yes.
So, very happy.
All right, Wayne, why don't you go ahead and explain the plot of this film for us?
All right, so here's the synopsis breakdown. Let me get down to it real quick here. A young Anthony Soprano is growing up in one of the most tumultuous eras in Newark's history, becoming a man just as rival gangsters begin to rise up and challenge the all-powerful DeMeo crime family's hold over the increasingly race-torn city. Caught up in the changing times is the uncle he idolizes, Dickie Moltisanti, who struggles to manage both his professional and personal responsibilities, and whose influence over his nephew will help make the impressionable teenager into the all-powerful mob boss we later come to know, Tony Soprano. Now, this is an interesting synopsis because there's been some mixed reviews about The Many Saints of Newark. Those that really wanted it to be more about the Sopranos and the DeMeo crime family, and that's, that is what we get essentially. But we also get a pretty in-depth look into Leslie Odom Jr.'s character, Harold McBrayer.
Yes.
And I don't want to belittle people's opinions, but I don't know what the gripe is about because I did enjoy this movie. It is very well done. I'm sorry that they didn't get the Soprano fix that they were hoping for. I want to start out by addressing Michael Gandolfini. I understand that he is the son of James Gandolfini, and obviously, there's obviously some resemblance there, but my God, he captured the expressions and the essence of Tony Soprano. even in the younger versions, so well. And I am a fan, so I guess I could be a little bit biased, but I just think he did a fantastic job capturing not only the mannerisms, but the tics. He just did a fantastic job. And that was one of the biggest things I was worried about. He doesn't come into the film till roughly almost halfway in.
About halfway. William Lustwig plays him up until then as the 9-year-old or whatever he's supposed to be, Tony Soprano. Yeah. So this movie, I liked this movie, but there are some things that I wanted that I didn't get out of it, or some things, and it wasn't that I didn't get out of it. It was the fact that they gave us taste of younger Syl, younger Pussy, and Paulie, right? We get these younger characters, and I want to see more of them. I want to see more of Tony's dad, too, played by the great John Bernthal.
Absolutely.
I want to see more of Tony's mother, played here by Vera Farmiga, and a very interesting choice. And I listened to an interview with David Chase. They made her look somewhat similar to Carmela on purpose. So some people were confused and thought that maybe that was Edie Falco playing his mother. It's Vera Farmiga with a more Edie Falco representative nose on her face.
The role of Livia is directly based on David Chase's mother.
Yes.
So all the stuff that we saw is stuff that happened to David Chase in his life. So yes. I always thought that was such an interesting tidbit.
Yes, for sure. You get Joey Diaz too, who plays Pussy's father in a good role. But it was one of those things. I thought Alessandro was good as Dickie Moltisanti. I just wanted. I don't know if I'm like those other people that you're talking about or not, but I wanted it to feel more. It felt like a flashback episode, like a 2-hour flashback episode. Of something we needed to give us a more backstory and why Christopher maybe is the way he is too, because he basically was raised without a father, and obviously the bigger thing of why Tony was the way Tony was.
I really think they could have focused more on them. I'm in agreement there, but the people that are saying this is a bad movie because they didn't get what they wanted.
Yeah, that I don't agree. I do think it's a good movie. I just think there are. You know what? I'll appreciate it more, Wayne, if it leads either into more movie sequels where we can explore a young Tony Soprano becoming friends with Syl and Paulie and Pussy and getting those relationships going, and also the influence of his father, who's kind of a dick, that kind of stuff. I think I would honestly want to see a series. I want the Sopranos prequel series now with these younger characters and Junior. I mean, Corey Stoll as Junior was pretty fantastic, and I think.
Oh yeah, and his epic line. Forgive me if anybody's sensitive to swear words, but your sister's cunt.
Yes.
I was waiting for it, and it finally happened. I was like, yes, there it is. And of course, without any spoilers, how they ended the film.
Yes.
Going directly into the theme song of The Sopranos.
Which was, yes. And that's why I think that should lead directly either into another movie where all the focus is going to be Tony, or a series where the focus is a young Tony.
I love the series. And I hope David Chase and all those involved would consider coming back or doing something, because I want it now. I want it real.
And I think, and that's where it's I don't want to say the movie was a disappointment to me, because it wasn't. It was still, I enjoyed it. It was a good movie. But I feel like we're not going to get more, and that's what kind of upsets me a little bit, is I want to see more. Yeah. I want to see more of John Magaro as Syl, because I thought it was a great portrayal. I also think it was funny, too. I guess it was his choice when Tony was a kid still, to have the comb over, and then by the time they went 4 years ahead, he's like, then we'll do the toupee. That was John Magaro's recommendation to David Chase. and they like that idea.
For me, we didn't get enough Polly Walnuts being eccentric and like you know with the manicures and stuff and the new jacket.
You did get with the jacket with the I just got this jacket. Come on now, like do it. That I thought that was funny. Lots of Polly moments, and then lots of Syl moments too, where Syl was like towards the end when he goes to Dickie and he kind of talks to him like how he talks to Tony, where he goes to Tony in the series and gives him advice all the time. It was fun. It was nice to see Syl be that character in that moment at the end of the film. That's not giving anything away. That's just a moment that I liked in the movie. To your point, Michael Gandolfini did a really nice job. A bit of a raw performance, but I think it's his first movie, so you're gonna get that. But I thought he did a really good job. He looked like Tony. We do get to see young Carmela for like 5 seconds.
Yep.
Which I thought was fun. Yeah, just overall, it's a good movie. Just I would say if you're expecting it to reach the level of the series, kind of temper your expectations a little bit. Would be my suggestion.
Because I was so looking forward to this, it wasn't what I expected, and I did have a harder time getting into it or getting into the flow because I was expecting certain things to happen and it just didn't.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But I still really enjoyed it. I loved all the little flashbacks and the little Easter eggs. It's nice to see Satriel's.
Yep.
They touched on some things with flashbacks that they did in the show that they, addressed in this movie. I talked about the theme song at the end. I loved the ice cream truck was something that they touched on in the series, which was great.
Yeah, that was fun to see.
What happened to Christopher? They talked about that, which was a nice tie-in.
Yeah.
The big reveal, though, about what happens to a couple of the main characters is kind of like, because they talk about it in the actual show. And then the source behind what happens of being cryptic because I don't want to ruin anything.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch. Now I understand why characters don't like each other.
Right, exactly. And Ray Liotta, too, playing double duty. I did not know that was coming. I thought that was interesting. He plays basically an identical twin. He is both Dickie's father and Dickie's uncle. That was an interesting twist, I think, that I was not aware of. And if you even look credited, he's only credited as his father initially. Right. So I think they kind of kept it from us because they wanted to make you kind of wonder once. Because if you watch the trailer, you see him talking to him in prison, but then Dickie's father is not in the movie very long, so that it's a spoiler, I guess, but an early spoiler.
Well, yeah, you're like, what the hell is happening?
Right, exactly. And then it's like, oh, okay. So they kind of explain that later in the movie, but overall, like I said, it's a good movie. I guess I don't know what I was necessarily expecting. I was pleasantly surprised to see a lot of younger versions of the characters we grew to love in The Sopranos, not just Tony. And I thought that was a nice little fun twist for me because I wasn't expecting that for all those characters. But yeah, overall, I think it's enjoyable. If you get a chance, if you have HBO Max, go watch it now, or go see it in theaters if that's your bag. But it's definitely a well-made, at the least a well-made 2-hour Sopranos episode flashback. Yep. I would say. I will leave with this, Wayne. To me, it was a bit off-putting to have. I love that he was back, but to have Michael Imperioli narrating his dad's story from beyond the grave was weird to me. I don't know if that, like, I don't know. It just said, I was like, oh, okay. So we're, like, I liked the opening. I thought the opening was great where we were going and we were hearing people talk from their gravestones. I thought that was very eerie. I liked that. So having a line from Christopher from his gravestone, I thought would have been cool. But then the fact that he, took over the narration duties, was kind of odd to me. I don't know.
Well, see, it worked for me because when Christopher is born and he cries anytime Tony comes near him, I like that whole tie-in about, even as a baby, he knows that this guy's going to be bad news for him.
This is true. That was something I think obviously that was maybe that was the intention and that's why they put it in there. It seemed to me it was just a bit off-putting at first. It was like, wait a minute, is The Sopranos like a supernatural series now? Like, what are we saying here? But yeah, it definitely did help tie that part in later. All right, so our next movie is called The Guilty. It was directed by Antoine Fuqua, written by Nick Pizzolatto. It is a remake from a film 3 years ago called The Guilty by Gustav Moeller, Emil Nygaard, and Emil Nygaard Albertson. This one stars Jake Gyllenhaal. Everybody else is like Riley Q is in it, and a couple other people make Paul. Let's see, the voice cast includes Ethan Hawke, Riley Keough, Eli Gorey, Paul Dano, Peter Sarsgaard. You don't see them at all; they're on the phone. So, The Guilty is a film about a 911 dispatcher played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and the whole movie takes place in the dispatch room area. He is a disgraced cop who's on trial for manslaughter or whatever. They kind of go through the whole thing throughout, so that's why he's working in the dispatch. He's kind of been shuffled over there until the trial's over. Um, so he kind of hates being there. He's kind of an asshole, and he ends up getting this call from a woman who has been kidnapped in the back of a van. And so it takes us through the whole process of him trying to find out where she is. His job is just to report it. But he ends up getting more involved, more emotionally involved, and with everything going on with his case and with his wife leaving him, which you find out as well. I mean, he has a kid, and there's kids involved in this case and stuff. It becomes more emotional for him, and he latches on to this case. It's a very intense film. Wayne, I want you to tell me what you thought about it first.
This was interesting because I, at one point, was an alarm dispatcher in a similar type role, not so much 911 calls, but I interacted with 911 operators often in my job as a alarm dispatcher for a security company. So it was very interesting to have those kind of conversations, and the tension, if you will, is they did a nice job on it because they don't always keep their cool. It's like, just give me the details. It's like, well, I don't have the details. Maybe you should get somebody out there.
Yeah. So what did you think of the movie then overall?
I enjoyed it. I did. I thought that where he is calling people trying to get other officers to do illegal things kind of hinted at what type of cop that he was, which I found was interesting.
Yeah.
I found the ending to be both really nice and surprising, and then borderline unbelievable at the end as well, if you know what I mean.
Yes. So the reason I wanted you to talk on it first, Wayne, is because I saw the original like a week ago. So after watching I kind of wish I didn't, because I feel like if I didn't see the original, I would have watched this movie and I would have enjoyed it more. But because I saw the original, it's almost exactly the same movie with some minor changes. They changed the ending; it's a little more buttoned up here in the American version, and for a good reason. But you're right; it is a bit unbelievable, and like the ending of the original film was more ambiguous. And when he has his big speech at the end of this movie, he's in a room by himself. Now, granted, he's being recorded, so it's all going to be heard. Regardless, in the original movie, he's out in the bullpen with all the other people, so they kind of hear everything he says in those final moments. I love Gyllenhaal, and I'm a huge Antoine Fuqua fan. Training Day and some of his other flicks as well. It was too much the same. Like, there were times where it was almost a shot for shot remake. And so I wanted something a little different. Now, they did change enough things to be like, okay, well, this doesn't happen this way. This didn't happen that way. There's certain things with the child which happen in the remake and don't happen here. I wanted to like it more, and I was hoping that they were going to do enough different to make it more interesting, but it was basically the same movie. I would recommend just either not watching the original or only watching the original, because I think you'll ruin it for yourself if you try to watch both of them like I did. which is, I think, what happened.
It's interesting. It's a shot-for-shot remake. I initially go back to the Psycho remake of 1998 with Vince Vaughn. It's basically just a shot-for-shot remake. It's like, what's the point of doing it this way then?
Right, exactly. If you're gonna remake something, you got to make it different, because it's not like The Guilty, the remake, the original The Guilty is on Hulu, so it's not like it's unreachable for American audiences, right? They could go watch it right now. Now, granted, I get it doesn't have or it has subtitles. Okay, so some people aren't gonna watch it, but enough people, I think, will watch it anyway. It just, I don't know. If you're gonna do a remake like this, you have to do something different enough, and I just don't think they did different enough. They changed the story a little bit, but not enough to make me go, "Oh wow!" Like, I see why they changed it and why they buttoned it up nicer at the end, because they wanted it to be more of a happier, like, justice was served ending. Where, like I said, the original did not do that, did not give us that, and I like that more. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad movie. I think people will watch it and they'll enjoy it for what it is. I just, again, having seen the original, it made me not like this one as much as I thought I would, because I love Gyllenhaal. We've talked about him in the last couple episodes, how great he is as an actor. He's probably one of the best of our generation right now. He is fantastic in this movie. It's just, like I said, I basically watched the same movie over again, and I could have, I wish I would have watched him in something else other than a remake of that movie. So that's my only thought, I guess, my final thought on that. All right, so on to what we've watched this week. I started my 31 Days of Horror. I started with The Wolfman, so I watched that yesterday. I have not watched anything else today yet. Throughout the week, I didn't really watch much. Just some TV shows that I was catching up on. Wayne, what did you watch this week? Anything interesting?
I revisited the Hangover movies. I was sitting around, I'm like, I could just use some stupid laughter. So watched all three of those. The first one is great. It's a classic. Second one is just a remake, basically, with them in Bangkok.
Yeah.
The one, they tried to do a little bit more with it, which I give them credit for. I laughed a lot, and I did enjoy them all. So I was appreciative of that. I am actually currently watching Britney versus Spears on Netflix, the Britney Spears conservatorship drama, and it really seems like her father is a piece of shit. Like, just stating that she doesn't have the mental capacity to make decisions for herself. While she has a residence in Las Vegas, while she went on tour, while she was a judge for the X Factor. But, for those of you that don't know, conservatorship is basically the court's deciding that you don't have the ability to make decisions for yourself or control your own money. So somebody is appointed for you.
Yes.
They are damn near impossible to get out of. Yeah, it's a whole twisted thing. We talked about conservatorships in the movie that we reviewed, maybe about 4 to 6 months ago. It's a Netflix film. I don't remember what it's called or who's in it. But this is a topic that is coming up more frequently and that people need to be aware of. But that is very good thing. If you're a Britney fan, or even if you're familiar with her music, obviously from back in the mid to late 90s and into the 2000s, it's an interesting watch.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. It was something that was on my radar. I just haven't got around to it yet, so we'll see. All right, everybody. So for the news this week, James DeMonico, director of The Purge, is working on a horror film with Pete Davidson. On My Block is getting a spinoff called Free Ridge at Netflix. Paul Thomas Anderson has a new movie that was kind of a surprise to everybody. It's called Licorice Pizza. It stars Bradley Cooper, Sean Penn, Alana Haim from the band Haim, and Cooper Hoffman, who is the son of Oscar winner Philip Seymour Hoffman. So most people may not know this, but Paul Thomas Anderson, I won't say started the career of Philip Seymour Hoffman, but he used him in all his movies until he passed away. So it's kind of like nostalgic and nice to see that he gives Philip Seymour Hoffman's son a debut role and the main role in his next movie. I'm looking forward to that. His movies are always interesting, even if they're not good. So we'll see how that turns out. The Boys spinoff is a go at Amazon, so that will be happening. It'll be the superheroes in college, basically. Original Law and Order is coming back, Wayne, for its 21st season. So they haven't announced a cast yet, but they're going to bring back the original Law and Order show that ran for 20 seasons before being canceled in 2012. William.
Jerry Orbach.
Yeah, I know Jerry Orbach has passed away. Some of the other actors have passed away too. So we'll see. Sam Waterston is still around though, so hopefully he comes back. I always liked him. William Shatner book series Tech Wars becoming an animated series. Sex Education has been renewed for season 4. Mr. Harrigan's Phone from Blumhouse and Stephen King. It will star Jaden Martell and Donald Sutherland. So that's a movie coming out, being made, and probably coming out in the next year or two. Releases coming up soon. Cowboy Bebop, the TV series starring John Cho, hits Netflix November 19th. Cobra Kai season 4 lands December 31st. The Harder They Fall Western with Idris Elba, Jonathan Majors, Lakeith Stanfield, Regina King, Zazie Beetz, and Delroy Lindo hits Netflix November 3rd. And Wayne, I know you're excited about this next one. The Book of Boba Fett debuts December 29th. That'll be the Boba Fett TV series on Disney+.
Outstanding.
Deaths this week, Basil Hoffman from Ordinary People and The Artist, dead at 83, and Michael Tylo, veteran soap opera star, dead at 73. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate all the listeners and people that comment, which aren't very many, but hey, it's okay. So this has been Now Showing with Mike and Wayne. Have a great week.